Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm taking a look at the 2026 governor's map and going state by state, looking at every single poll, the most recent poll that has come out, and for how the race is currently looking. So for instance, if the newest poll out of the state of South Dakota has Republican plus 20, I'm going to assign South Dakota as safe Republican using the rating system of 15 and above being safe, 5 to 15 being likely, 1 to 5 being lean, and 1 and under being tilt. So with that out of the way, we're first going to start in the West Coast and just work our way east. So we're going to start out with the state of Oregon. So Oregon, this governor's race, this is the Democratic incumbent Governor Tina Kotek. And in this race, we're going to go down to the polling. There's currently some polls between Tina Kotek, Ed Deal, Kotek and Christine Drazen, and Kotek and Chris Dudley, and they're actually closer than you may initially expect. So for the candidates, a lot of Republicans are running. We don't have any indicators right now of who the favorite is in these respective primary. So for the ratings overall, there's solid Democrat, likely, and lean Democrat. This is roughly about a 7-point lead or so, a 6-point lead, a 5-point lead on this one, and a 10-point lead, all of which fall within the likely rating. So we're going to assign Oregon to the Democrats in the likely category. Next, we're going to go to the state of California. Now, California is a very interesting one because it has an open primary system where the top two vote getters are going to advance to the general election. So the general election is currently listed as solid or safe for the Democrats, but right now, in the most recent polling, it's very, very close, with Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton currently listed as the leaders among the Republicans as two of the top two vote getters. Ultimately, how this shakes out, we're going to have to wait and see, as there's still a lot of undecided voters currently left. The most recent Echelon Insights poll has Hilton at 20, Eric Swalwell at 15. So I could give it to the Republicans based on how the polls are currently shaking out, but assuming that's one Republican versus one Democrat, Democrats are still favored to win California by more than 15 points. So we're going to audible a little bit and put California into the safe Democratic category. Next, we're going to go to the state of Idaho. Idaho is usually a very Republican state, so if there's a pullout, I'm not expecting it to be too competitive. The incumbent governor, Brad Little, is running again on the Democratic side. Looks like there are two Democratic candidates running. I don't believe there's been any polling done thus yet. It's only predictions of solid Republican. So again, no polls. We're going to audible and put the race into safe for the Republicans. Next, we're going to go to the state of Nevada. Nevada is a very interesting state because this is expected to be one of the more competitive ones for 2026. This is Governor Joe Lombardo. He is the Republican governor who won in 2022, and he'll be facing off against Nevada Attorney General Aaron Ford. Now, I do know there are some polls for this race. It's listed as either a toss-up, tilt Republican, or lean Republican across all the four major rankings. The most recent poll came out from March 10th to 2013 from Noble Predictive Insights, and it shows Lombardo leading Aaron Ford 39 to 38 with 17% undecided. So this is a very close race in the most recent poll, and thus so we are going to put this race at that 1% lead for the incumbent Republican into the tilt Republican category. So Nevada is certainly looking like to be a very close race. Next, we're going to go to the state of Arizona. Arizona, this is Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. She won in 2022, defeating Carrie Lake. On the Republican side, Andy Biggs is running against U.S. Representative David Schweikert, though after Karen Taylor Robson dropped out, Andy Biggs is expected to be the Republican candidate. As for the general election, Katie Hobbs is leading in the early polling averages, and the Cook Political Report Inside Elections have this toss-up. Sabla Crystal Ball Race to the White House have the Democrats favored. In the most recent poll, that Noble Predictive Insights poll, but this one from back in February, shows Katie Hobbs leading 42 to 37, so a 5-point lead. So actually the most recent poll in the state of Arizona has Arizona in the likely Democratic category at 5%. So that is the state of Arizona. Next, we're going to go to the state of Alaska. In the state of Alaska, we can see here, this is going to be, I believe, an open race with the Republican governor, Mike Dunleavy, term limited and not eligible to run again. As for the general election, there are a lot of candidates running on the Democratic and Republican side. It is currently listed as solid Republican by the top two Cook Political Report Inside Elections. Sabla Crystal Ball has it likely Republican. So the way it works is all the candidates face off, and then the top two advance in ranked choice voting. So for the hypothetical polling with Mary Peltola, showed you would have a very strong chance at winning that one, but with her running for Senate, the race has been upended a little bit. As you can see, there are a lot of Republicans running. You have Dave Brunson, Click Bishop, Nancy Dahlstrom, the lieutenant governor. I would say she probably starts out as the early favorite right now on the Republican side. We can look on the Democratic side as well. Tom Begich, the former minority leader of the Alaska Senate, he's the favored Democrat at this time. So if the most recent poll between Begich, Bishop, Dave Bronson versus Bernadette Wilson, this is 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Begich is leading by a lot with 25% undecided. Though again, we have to look at the polls here for what a Dahlstrom versus Begich election would be, and technically that does not have any polls thus far that show that, with Tom Begich being the only Democrat candidate. So we could go with this one, but there's such a massive discrepancy here. We're just going to go with the rankings for now of solid Republican, likely Republican, tilt Republican, and we're going to average it out and just put Alaska into the likely Republican category right now, because we could put it as safe Democrat, but again, we don't know how the ranked choice voting is going to ultimately play out. Next we're going to go to the state of Hawaii. In Hawaii, this is a Democratic governor, Josh Green, and it's expected to be a pretty solid victory. No polling has been done yet, but solid Democratic rankings. Not really any surprise. Hawaii would go into the safe Democratic category. Next, we're going to go to the state of Wyoming, another Republican state that usually goes very red. This is going to be a new race, as Mark Gordon, the governor, is term limited. 3 Republicans are running. No polling yet for the general election. Still a solid Republican ranking. No surprise, Wyoming goes red for the Republicans starting out. Next, we're going to go to the state of Colorado, where Colorado is interesting because this is going to be Governor Jared Polis, who is term limited, and current U.S. Senator Michael Bennet is running for this seat against Phil Weiser, the Attorney General of Colorado. Assuming we'd probably see Michael Bennet be the Democratic nominee, but we'll have to wait and see for sure. Republicans, there are a lot of candidates running, but really not too much of a chance in this race. No polling yet, but 3 out of the 4 rankings have it as solid for the Democrats. I expect Colorado to be over 15 points when everything is said and done. Next, we're going to go to the state of New Mexico. New Mexico, the governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, a Democrat, was reelected, and she is term limited for 2026. So the top 2 Democrats right now are Sam Bregman, the Bernalillo County District Attorney, and Deb Haaland, former U.S. Secretary of the Interior. On the Republican side, Greg Hull, the mayor of Rio Rancho, is likely the favorite Republican as of right now. For the general election, there's not been any polling done thus far. All the predictions have it as likely Democrat, except for race to the White House, which has it as lean. So without any polling, we're going to put New Mexico into the likely Democratic category. Next, we're going to go to the state of South Dakota. South Dakota, this is going to be the governor, Larry Roden. He is term limited. It is an open race with a very contested Republican primary underway. Or no, I'm sorry, he is not term limited. He is running for re-election, but it's still a competitive primary underway. Roden's facing off against Dusty Johnson, the U.S. representative, and John Hanson, the Speaker of the South Dakota House of Republicans. Yeah, this primary is looking like to be very, very close. Emerson College's most recent poll shows Johnson at 28, Roden 17, Doden 18, John Hanson 14, but still 23% undecided. So the current governor is actually trailing in the most recent Republican primary poll. On the Democratic side, Executive Director of the South Dakota Democrats, Daniel Allers, is the respective Democratic nominee. No polling yet for the general election, but 3 safe Republican rankings put South Dakota into the safe GOP column. Next, we're going to go to the state of Nebraska, where Nebraska has a very competitive Senate race that is underway. For the governor's race, though, probably not going to be too competitive. The governor is Jim Pillen and is seeking a second term. And on the Democratic side, there are 2 Democrats running, including Larry Marvin and Lynn Waltz. No polling yet, 3 solid Republican rankings. We could put Nebraska into the safe Republican category. Now, Kansas is another state that's actually expected to be very competitive for 2026. If you're not familiar with this, Kansas currently has a Democratic governor, Laura Kelly. She was reelected in 2022 after winning for the first time in 2018 in the blue wave there. She is term limited and cannot seek another term. However, Democrats Ethan Corson, Cindy Hochler, and Marty Turley are running, including Sherry's Davids, U.S. representative from the 3rd District, has expressed some interest in running as well. As for Laura Kelly, she's given her endorsement to Ethan Corson, so that would give him a bit of a leg up in this Democratic primary, though the most recent poll from Public Policy Polling shows Cindy Hochler leading by roughly 33 to 9%, though this is a Holscher's campaign-sponsored poll. On the Republican side, there are a lot of Republicans running, including Jeff Collier, the former governor, Ty Masterson, the president of the Kansas Senate. You have Vicki Schmidt, the Kansas Insurance Commissioner, Scott Schwab, the Kansas Secretary of State. So this Republican primary is very much underway as well, and we're going to have to wait and see how this ultimately goes. For the general election, no polls have been given yet, but two rankings have it as lean for the Republicans. One has it as toss-up, and one has it as tilt. So this is going to be a very competitive race. Going to go with the 50-50 of lean Republican here and put Kansas into the lean Republican category. You could argue tilt if you would like to, but we're going to put it in lean Republican just for now. But that is expected to be a very close race as well, especially if the polls are going well for the Democrats at this current point in time. Republicans still favored to flip it, but Democrats look like they could be in for another competitive fight in Kansas. Next, we're going to go to the state of Oklahoma. So Oklahoma, this is going to be the governor, Kevin Stitt. He is term limited, so this is going to be an open race, and this is all about the Republican primary. Democrats don't really have too much of a chance in the general election here, with a lot of Republicans running. For the general election, solid Republican across the board with no polls as of now. No surprise, Oklahoma goes safe for the Republicans. One governor's race that will be getting a lot of attention, though, possibly due to the Senate race, is the state of Texas with Greg Abbott. And this one is interesting also because Greg Abbott is running for another consecutive term. This would be, I believe, is it his fifth term? He's running for election for a fourth term. So he already won the primary. He's facing off in the general election against Democrat Gina Hinojosa. For the general election, solid Republican from the three rankings, lean Republican from race to the White House. The most recent UT Tyler poll, however, has Abbott leading 49 to Hinojosa's 41. So that's an 8-point lead. That would put Texas into the likely Republican rating. I think it's more likely we see Texas go likely red than safe red, but we'll wait and see. Well, that's what the polls say for Texas right now. So with that, so far, 21 seats to go. Republicans are at 17. Democrats are at 12. We're going to go up to the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is an interesting state due to the fact that Governor Tim Walz is not running for re-election after initially expressing interest in running for another term for a third term. But U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar is in this race. She's going to be the Democratic nominee. And despite several Republicans running in this race, including the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell, this is not going to be a very competitive race at the general election level in all likelihood. Likely Democrat from Inside Elections and Race to the White House, safe Democrat from Sadler Crystal Ball and Cook Political Report. Klobuchar leading by 20 points over Peggy Bennett, leading by roughly about 13, 14 points or so over Lisa DeMuth. Klobuchar up, let's look for Mike Lindell, 53 to 31. So really depends on which Republican wins the primary. Right now, the most recent poll, Mike Lindell was the leader. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously, how it goes. The Republican caucus straw poll showed Lisa DeMuth leading in that one. So we could either go with DeMuth or Mike Lindell for the matchups. For DeMuth, it would be about a 13 to 14 point lead, so that'd be about a likely lead for Mike Lindell. Klobuchar would be leading in the Emerson College poll by roughly about 22 points. So we could go in the same Emerson College poll with Lisa DeMuth or Mike Lindell. It's really the difference between likely or safe. If we average them out, it would end up being a safe margin. So we'll give Klobuchar the win in the safe column, but one of those two is likely going to be the Republican nominee. Now we're going to go to the state of Iowa. Iowa is a very interesting governor's election, as this one has become really competitive, kind of out of nowhere, but also kind of a little bit expected, but it's really starting to get competitive. So the Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, is not running for another term, but the reason this is competitive is that the Democrats are running Rob Sand, who the presumptive Democratic nominee, is currently the Iowa Auditor of State and the only statewide elected Democrat as of right now in Iowa. He is the candidate. The Republican U.S. Representative Randy Feenstra is likely to be the Republican nominee, and this race is very close. For the predictions, 3 out of the 4 have it as lean Republican. Race to the White House has it as a toss-up. The only poll for this race right now comes from Z2A Research, which is a Democratic pollster and Democratic-sponsored pollster from back in October. But Rob Sand is leading Randy Feenstra 45 to 43 with 12% undecided. So with that, Iowa would actually go into the lean Democratic category for a 2-point Democratic lead as of right now. So Iowa's a very fascinating race to watch for as well. Next, we can look at the state of Arkansas. Arkansas, this is Republican Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she'll be facing off against Democrat Frederick Love. I don't know if any polls have been done as of yet. No, they have not, but the rankings all are solid Republican, and that makes sense. Arkansas goes into the safe Republican category. Next, we're going to go to the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is expected to be one of the closest ones in this 2026 cycle, and this is also interesting because the Republican primary is pretty much, I would say, locked up for U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany. There's not really too much of a contention. Two of the other candidates in the race have already dropped out, and Tom Tiffany has the endorsement of Donald Trump. Now, on the Democratic side, the primary is very competitive. The former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, in 2022 U.S. Senate nominee, is running for this race. Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley running. Francesca Hong, a state representative, is running as well. She's been surging in the polling recently, as well as Missy Hughes, Brett Hulsey, incumbent Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez. There's a really competitive Democratic primary underway here. And the polling in the most recent Marquette University poll has Francesca Hong leading at 14%, with Mandela Barnes at 11%, and 65% undecided. The Patriot poll from before that has Hong at 27% and Mandela Barnes at 18%. The Marquette University poll from back in February has Hong up 11-10. So it's a very, very close race on the Democratic side, but the most recent polls has Francesca Hong actually leading in the Democratic primaries. So what that means for the general election, well, it's still a complete toss-up of a race. Toss-up from all four of the political prediction rankings. For Mandela Barnes versus Tom Tiffany, Mandela Barnes is leading 43-41. David Crowley versus Tom Tiffany, Crowley leads by 1 point. But Francesca Hong versus Tom Tiffany, who's leading in the most recent Democratic primary polling, Tom Tiffany is leading her by roughly 3 points. Sarah Rodriguez leading Tom Tiffany by 3 points. So the prospective Democratic nominee right now, though there's still a ton of undecided support to go, we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. Francesca Hong's the leader. Tom Tiffany is leading by 3. So in the most recent poll, technically Illinois is going lean Republican for Wisconsin is going lean Republican for Tom Tiffany versus Francesca Hong right now. But if it's any of the other Democratic candidates, Wisconsin goes lean Democratic. So I'm going to put Wisconsin as lean Republican right now because I think Hong is the narrow favorite in the Democratic primary, but I'm very closely watching Wisconsin's primaries because that could have a very important and drastic impact on the outcome of that race based on the polling thus far. Now we can go to the state of Illinois, who just a few weeks ago had their primaries, so we know how this one's going to go. J.B. Pritzker will be facing off against Darren Bailey in the general election. As for the general election thus far, it's listed as safe Democratic from all the political prediction sources, and the only poll from back in November shows Pritzker up by 20 points. So not really a surprise here. The most recent poll, Illinois has it as safe for the Democrats. Next, we're going to go to the state of Tennessee. Tennessee, this is, I believe the Republican primary has not been settled yet, but the Governor Bill Lee is term limited, and the most prominent Republican running is U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn. I fully expect she'll win the Republican primary. On the Democratic side, 4 Democrats are running, but the general election is going to be pretty red. Solid Republican across the board. Marsha Blackburn versus Jerry Green, she's up by about 21 points. And John Rose versus Jerry Green, he's up also by roughly around, 17 points or so, 16 points. So not really much of a surprise. Tennessee goes into the safe Republican category. Now we can look at the state of Alabama. Alabama, this is going to be, I believe this is Governor Kay Ivey, is term limited and cannot run for another term. So 3 Republicans are running, but the most notable is U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville. He's expected to win the Republican primary. Now on the Democratic side, former U.S. Senator Doug Jones is running, the Democrat who briefly served in the U.S. Senate from 2018 to 2021. He'll make this race more competitive than it usually would be, but it's still listed as solid Republican from 3 out of the 4 prediction sites, and Rachel White House has it as likely. Tuberville versus Doug Jones, the most recent poll, comes from back in November, and it shows Tuberville leading by around a 19-point lead, which would still put Alabama, despite Doug Jones in the race, into the safe Republican category. Not really too much of a surprise, but still Doug Jones may be making it a little bit closer than it otherwise would be. Next, we can look at the state of South Carolina. We're going to go South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. South Carolina is fascinating because the Republican primary in this race is completely wide open last time I checked. Governor Henry McMaster is term limited, and a lot of Republicans are running, including Pamela Evett, Josh Kimbrell, Nancy Mace, Ralph Norman, Alan Wilson. It is completely up for grabs in this race. And look at the polling averages here. The most recent Republican poll has Pamela Evett at 19 points, Nancy Mace at 18, Ralph Norman 13, Alan Wilson 15. A complete toss-up in this primary. The averages and the aggregate pollsters only have Mace up 0.2, 0.9, and 1.7. So she's leading in the averages, Nancy Mace, but Pamela Evett's leading in the most recent poll. It's super close. On the Democratic side, State Representative Jermaine Johnson is the likely favorite to be the Democratic nominee at this time. There's no polling for the general election yet, but 3 out of the 4 have the race listed as safe for the Republicans. So we'll put the South Carolina governor's race as safe for the Republicans right now. Next, we have the state of Georgia, which Georgia is a contender to be the closest governor's race in all of the United States in 2026. Georgia, this is going to be Governor Brian Kemp, and he is term limited and cannot seek another term. The Republican primary is currently being fought between Burt Jones, the lieutenant governor, Rick Jackson, a healthcare executive, Chris Carr, the attorney general, and Brad Raffensperger, the secretary of state. Now, this Republican primary is interesting because once Rick Jackson joined the race got completely upended, where it looked like that Burt Jones, who has the endorsement of President Trump, was facing off against Chris Carr and Brad Raffensperger. And though there was a lot of support still up for grabs, it looked like Burt Jones had the early lead and would probably consolidate a lot of that support. Rick Jackson entering, though, has completely won up this race. The most recent Emerson poll from just a few days ago, or for last month, Burt Jones 21, Rick Jackson 20, essentially a tied race, with Raffensperger at 11 and Chris Carr at 6. JMC Analytics poll from right around the same time a few days later, Rick Jackson at 37, Burt Jones at 22, still 25% undecided, so it's anyone's election right now. But Rick Jackson and Burt Jones seem to be in a heated fight for first place, with Rick Jackson slightly leading in the most, I would say, in the most recent numbers due to the fact that he's leading by a lot in the most recent poll. On the Democratic side, there are a lot of Democrats running as well, including former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. He's running. Jason Estevez is running. Derek Jackson is running. Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta, I would say is the leading Democrat right now, and Mike Thurmond. The polling on this one shows Keisha Lance Bottoms with a very large lead over the rest of the field, and I would say she's the favorite at this current point in time. As for the general election, despite Georgia being so close, there's actually no general election polls as of now. 3 out of the 4 rankings have it as toss-up. Inside Elections has it as tilt Republican. So I could just leave it as blank and not give a prediction at this current point in time because that's what the majority of them are. But for the sake of today's video, that'd be very boring. So we're going to go with the 1 tilt Republican ranking and make Georgia tilt Republican for now. But hopefully in a month's time, the next time I do this video, we'll have more polls out of the general election for Georgia's governor's race. Now, Florida's an interesting one as well. Florida, this is Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, and if you've been covering or if you've been watching politics the last few years, you know Florida's become a lot more of a red state under Ron DeSantis. However, the Republican primary could be interesting. U.S. Representative Byron Donalds is the leader right now. He's been endorsed by Donald Trump. The Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins is also running, as well as James Fishback, who's been getting a lot of talk on social media, a lot of it in a negative context, but he's been getting a lot of buzz online. Now, Byron Donalds has a very large lead over the rest of this Republican field and will probably be the Republican nominee. The Democrats, Jerry Demings and David Jolly, are both running, and I would say David Jolly's a slight favorite right now for the Democratic primary. He still has a lot of undecided vote to go, but he's leading in every single poll, including the Emerson College poll from March 29th to 31st, so a very recent poll to look at. He's up by about 11 points. Now, for the general election, this is actually looking to be a lot more of a competitive race than you may expect for Florida. Race to the White House has this race as lean for the Republicans, just updated from February 27th. Now, the other 3 rankings have this race listed as safe Republican, but the most recent poll from Emerson College, Donalds is leading Jerry Demings by roughly about 9 points, whereas Emerson College versus Byron Donalds, David Jolly, is only a 5-point lead. So even though they're both considered likely Republican, 44 to 39, only a 5-point lead, is certainly a lot more close and a lot more competitive than initially expected for a state that's gone so far right in terms of Republicans winning, like the state of Florida. So for Byron Donalds versus David Jolly, Florida actually starts out as likely Republican, though that is a state that's a lot closer than expected and could be a potential interesting one to watch, depending how things develop heading into November. Next, we're going to look at the state of Michigan, where Michigan, like with Georgia, is one of the marquee governor elections for 2026. Governor Gretchen Whitmer is term limited and cannot seek another term. Now, this race is interesting for the fact that independent Mayor Mike Duggan of Detroit is running, and he is getting a considerable amount of support in the general election. Right now, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson appears to be the likely Democratic candidate. On the Republican side, U.S. Representative John James is seeming to be the leading Republican candidate right now, though Perry Johnson, the 2024 presidential candidate, is making a pretty significant run for his money thus far. John James is at 26% in the most recent poll. Perry Johnson is at 21%. So I think John James overall is leading, but it's starting to get very, very close. Kind of what Rick Jackson was doing in the Georgia race, Perry Johnson is starting to make a very considerable run as well. As for the general election, all 4 prediction sites have it as a toss-up, and for good reason, and Mike Duggan being in this race is making it very, very close. As for Jocelyn Benson versus John James versus Mike Duggan, the average overall has John James leading by 0.7%, and Real Clear Politics has him leading by 3.5%. But the most recent poll from Impact Research, which is a Democratic pollster sponsoring Benson's campaign, has it as a 3-point race, with Benson at 39, James 36, and Mike Duggan up at 20 points. Now, the poll before that did show what a race would look like in a 3-point scenario, and that one has Mike Duggan at 30 points, John James at 29, Benson at 28. So the most recent poll has the Democrat leading by 3 points, so they would go into the lean Democratic category. But Michigan's governor's race is a very fascinating one due to the fact Mike Duggan running in this race is making it likely a lot more competitive than it probably otherwise would be in this midterm election environment. Speaking of a Midwestern state that is very competitive, we're going to go to the state of Ohio, where Ohio, sort of like Florida, has trended a lot to the right in recent years. This governor's race is shaping up to be also one of the closest in the country. Now, Republican incumbent Mike DeWine is term limited and cannot seek a third consecutive term. The Democratic candidate Amy Acton all but has the Democratic Party primary locked up. On the Republican side, 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is looking like to be the Republican nominee. And that's not really where the interesting part of this race is. It all comes down to the general election for why this is interesting. Because Race to the White House has it as toss-up, Sabato, Cook Politico have it lean Republican, Inside Elections has it as likely Republican. But thus far, Amy Acton has been the one that's been leading in all the polls, including the most recent poll from Qantas Insights, which is a Republican-affiliated pollster, showing Amy Acton leading Vivek Ramaswamy 46-45. Whereas the Emerson College poll from back in December also had Acton leading 46-45. I can't wait to see when Emerson releases another poll in this race, because this is a race you would think the Republicans would probably win, and probably win without not too much of an issue, but Amy Acton is looking like in a really strong position starting out thus far. How it ultimately goes, we'll have to wait and see, but Amy Acton in this video, in the most recent poll, is leading Ohio by a tilt Democratic margin of that 1-point lead. So Ohio is very interesting to watch for, and I can't wait to see how that race develops. Next, we're going to go to the state of Pennsylvania. This is going to be Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, who certainly the 2028 talk is going to pick up as soon as this race is over. Josh Shapiro will be facing off against Stacey Garrity, the Republican candidate in this race. As for the general election, solid Democratic from 2 rankings, likely Democrat from 2 rankings. The most recent poll for Shapiro versus Garrity comes from Susquehanna Polling and Research, and it shows roughly around a 22-point lead for Shapiro over Garrity. So for the purposes of this race, Pennsylvania goes into the safe Democratic category. And then again, Shapiro, all eyes will be on 2028. Next, we can go to the state of Maryland. This is going to be Democratic Governor Wes Moore. And Wes Moore is obviously going to be the Democratic nominee again. There are a lot of Republicans running in this primary. Most notably, Larry Hogan, the former governor, is not running. And that really takes all the wind out of the Republican sails in terms of making this a competitive race. Solid Democrat across the board for all the rankings. Only Wes Moore versus Larry Hogan showed it back in 2025 being a competitive race. Without Hogan in the race, we don't have any polling data to go off of, but all the predictions have it as safe, so we're going to put Maryland in the safe Democratic category. Now for the New York governor's race, Kathy Hochul is running for another term, and we just had a poll come out, I believe a few days ago, that gives us a good look at how this race is currently going. So Kathy Hochul will be the Democratic nominee in all likelihood. She was facing a Democratic primary challenge from Antonio Delgado, the former lieutenant governor, though he dropped out of the race right around February 10th 2026. So Kathy Hochul is going to be the Democratic nominee, and she'll be facing off against the Republican Bruce Blakeman, the Nassau County executive, who does have the endorsement of President Donald Trump after at least Stefanik withdrew from the race as well. As for the general election, this race is looking like to be a pretty solid win for Kathy Hochul, where she is at solid Democrat from 2 out of the 4 rankings, and the most recent poll, which came from Siena College, shows her at 47%, Bruce Blakeman at 34%. So overall, a 13-point lead for Kathy Hochul over Bruce Blakeman, a very large margin at this time. Still 16 points undecided, but at this current point in time, that 13-point lead would put the New York governor's race into the likely Democratic category, though Kathy Hochul looking like in this election environment going to win by a probably pretty large margin. Now we're going to finish off the video by going into New England, and we're going to start with the state of Vermont, a state that doesn't really get talked about too much at the governor level because it's pretty simple. If Phil Scott, the Republican governor, more of a liberal Republican governor, runs for re-election, he'll probably win this race, though that's still up in the air as he has not officially given an indication if he is running yet or not. But there's been no polling for the general election, but 2 rankings have it solid Republican. Sabra Crystal Ball has it as likely, Rachel White House has it as lean. So until we get a definitive answer on this one, I'm going to leave Vermont as safe for the Republicans. If Phil Scott decides to run for re-election, if he does not run for re-election, this is almost 100% a guaranteed automatic Democratic flip. For now, we'll leave it as safe for the Republicans. Next, we're going to go to the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts is going to be Democratic Governor Maura Healey. Now, this is an interesting one on the Republican side. As we know, Healey is going to be the Democratic candidate. The Republicans, 3 Republicans are running: Mike Keneally, Michael Minogue, and Brian Shortsleeve. As for this polling for the Republican primary, it's actually pretty competitive. The most recent poll from Pulse Decision Sciences, which was sponsored by Minogue's campaign, shows him leading 29 to Shortsleeve's 16, Keneally's 7. The poll before that from Suffolk University had Shortsleeve in November up 22 to Keneally's 13 to Minogue's 6. So it is his campaign's poll, but it seems Mike Minogue is surging in the Republican primary. As for the general, though, the Republicans' prospects are not too great, safe Democratic across the board in all the rankings. The most recent poll from the University of New Hampshire shows Maura Healey leading Mike Keneally by almost 30 points, about 27 points. Maura Healey versus Mike Minogue in that same poll shows her leading Mike Minogue also by around 30 points, about 29 to be exact. And then for Brian Shortsleeve, she's leading by 30 points. So whichever Republican runs against Healey in the most recent poll, it's going safe Democratic by right around 30 points. That is a safe win for Maura Healey and the Democrats. Next, we're going to look at the state of Connecticut. Connecticut's a state that's known for being very Democratic at the presidential level. At the governor level, it actually has a history of being pretty competitive. Now, the incumbent governor, Ned Lamont, is running again for re-election. Also, Josh Elliott, a state representative, is running as well. As for the polling on the Democratic side, though, Ned Lamont is a pretty strong lead in that University of New Hampshire poll and will likely be the Democratic candidate and governor once again. On the Republican side, 3 Republicans are running: Ryan Fazio, Betsy, I believe it's McGough. I don't want to get that name wrong and butcher the pronunciation, so I'll say McCaughey. And then we also have Aaron Stewart as well. As for the Republican primary and how things are currently looking in this one, the only poll from back in August showed Aaron Stewart leading Ryan Fazio 42 to 13. As for the predictions, solid Democrat across the board, though the most recent poll from August of 25 showed Ned Lamont at 50 to 42. So going with that poll, Connecticut starts out into the likely Democratic category. Just a few more states left. We have the state of Rhode Island, a state that isn't talked about too much as it's known as a very Democratic state. However, the Democratic governor primary is very interesting. The governor, Dan McKee, is running again for re-election against Helena Foulkes, the former CVS executive. But this Democratic primary is fascinating, as Helena Foulkes is actually leading in the polling average and most recent poll against Dan McKee, 24 to 15. So it looks like this might be an incumbent governor that's in real danger of losing this primary, depending on how the undecided voters in the primary ultimately shake out. On the Republican side, 3 Republicans are running, including Aaron Guckian, a former chair of the Warwick Sewer Authority, and Robert Raimondo, the cousin of the former Democratic governor, Gina Raimondo. As for the general election, though, this is going to be a pretty reliable Democratic win. 3 out of the 4 rankings are safe Democrat. Rhode Island, whether it's the governor or Foulkes, goes into the safe Democratic category. Two governors' races left. We have the state of New Hampshire, where Kelly Ayotte, the Republican governor, got elected for the first time in 2024. She's likely, has not confirmed it yet, but likely going to run for re-election in 2026. And she'll be facing off against, in all likelihood, Cindy Warmington, the runner-up on the Democratic primary for governor in 2024. She has a large lead over that Democratic primary right now. As for the predictions, likely Republican and solid Republican across the board. Cook, Politico, Sabato have it likely. Inside Elections solid. Race to the White House has it as tilt. The most recent poll comes from St. Anselm College between March 16th and 18th, so a pretty decent poll. For Ayotte versus Kuiper, she's leading by about 14 points. For Ayotte versus Warmington, she's leading by about 7. Both of those fall into the likely Republican category. I'd err more on the Warmington poll, as that's the more likely matchup. But New Hampshire with Kelly Ayotte goes into the likely Republican category for this video. Last governor's race we have to go over is the state of Maine. Maine's an interesting race that Janet Mills, the governor, is term limited. She's currently running for U.S. Senate in the Democratic primary against Graham Plattner. So it's a wide open primary on both the Democratic and Republican sides. And a lot of Democrats are running in this race. Shenna Bellows, Troy Jackson, Angus King, Hannah Pingree, and Nirav Shah are all running. This primary is very close and very competitive. The most recent poll is Nirav Shah leading at 31%, with Pingree at 16, Jackson 18, Bellows 17, and 6% undecided. This poll is sponsored by Jackson's campaign, Troy Jackson, so his support may even be overinflated in this poll. The Pan Atlantic Research poll from before that showed Shaw at 24%, tied with Angus King III, Hannah Pingree at 18, and Shenna Bellows at 16. So as for how this Democratic primary goes, really anyone's guess, completely up for grabs. Nirav Shah does seem to have a bit of an early lead based on the most recent Democratic poll thus far. On the Republican side, a lot of Republicans are running, including a member of the Bush family, Jonathan Bush, the nephew of former President George H.W. Bush. If you're unfamiliar, the Bush family do have a home, I believe, in Kennebunkport, Maine, and have a long history in Maine politics in that state. He is running in this race. As for the Republican primary, for the polling on that one, Robert Charles is leading the most recent poll, actually 26%, with Jonathan Bush down at 4%. So even though Bush is running, he's not having much support so far in the Republican primary, but we'll see how that ultimately goes, with 34% still undecided. So for the Democrats right now, it seems Nirav Shah is the leader, and on the Republican side, the most recent poll, Robert Charles is the leader. As for the general election, though, there's not been any polling done thus yet, with 2 polls as likely Democratic, 1 poll lean Democratic, and 1 poll tilt Democratic. We're going to go with the 50% here that show likely Democratic for this one and put Maine into the likely Democratic category. You could argue lean Democrat as well if you want. You could argue tilt Democrat, but I think likely Democrat is where it would be right now. So that was certainly a lot, but with all the polls, all the most recent polls in each governor's race across the country, the way things are currently going with the respective candidates, Democrats are favored to win 24 governor's races, Republicans are favored to win 26, with almost essentially an even split across the country of Democratic to Republican governor's races. But leave all your thoughts down in the comment section below. What you think about these races, who do you think is going to win, if you think the polls are right or wrong in anywhere, please leave all your thoughts. If you have any general comments about these elections at all, leave all those down below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.